Hello and welcome to the channel, The Wanderlust Way. Today's video we're going to focus on the Bronte family and their lives growing up in the picturesque Yorkshire village of Haworth. We're going to cover a brief history of the family and how they rose to their incredible literature talents. We'll look at aspects that may have inspired their work and see a treasure trove of personal items and memories associated with them all. You can expect a full walkthrough of the Bronte Parsonage, which is now a museum dedicated to them, and we'll stop and go into details about some of the features there. Haworth in general is a bit of a pilgrim spot for fans, so we'll explore some key areas to the village and talk about how they link to the Brontes. There is a darker side to this tale though, filled with misery and despair, and we'll go through that later on in the video. We'll pay our respects at their final resting place and explore the reasons behind their early deaths and how this changed the whole village forever. So please sit back, relax and enjoy the video. If you can, please hit the like button after you've watched it and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this in the future. The Brontes are the world's most famous literary family, and the parsonage at Haworth is where they wrote some of the greatest novels in the English language. Their literature and the compelling story of their lives have continued to enthrall and inspire generations of readers, writers, artists and visitors to Haworth from around the world. Here they lived at Haworth Parsonage after moving here in April 1820, when Irish-born Patrick Bronte was appointed perpetual curate. The following year, in September 1821, Mrs. Maria Bronte, wife of Patrick, died of uterine cancer at the age of 38, when the youngest of her 6 children, Anne, was still a baby. Her sister, Miss Elizabeth Branwell, came from Penzance in Cornwall to look after the children, and she remained here until her death in 1842, aged 66. Patrick was never to remarry following the death of his beloved Maria, and remained in his position in Haworth for over 40 years, outliving his wife and all of his 6 children. It is here in the parsonage that courageous Charlotte, the creator of Jane Eyre, the brilliant but ill-fated brother Branwell, Emily, author of Wuthering Heights, one of the darkest masterpieces of English literature, and Anne, whose novel The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which was extraordinary for its issue of women's rights. Here they lived and breathed. So let's take a step inside and explore the parsonage in more detail. The house was built in 1778-9 as a residence for the incumbent minister at St Michael and All Angels Church, and was occupied by the Bronte family from 1820 to 1861. Following on from the death of Patrick, some alterations were made to the house by his 4 successors, and this outraged Bronte enthusiasts at the time. A large gabled wing was added in 1878, and this is now where exhibitions are held. In 1928, Sir James Roberts, a local man, purchased the parsonage for the sum of £3,000 and presented it to the Bronte Society. On the 4th of August 1928, thousands of people thronged Church Street to witness the official opening of the Bronte Parsonage Museum. Mr. Bronte's study. Mr. Bronte used this room as a study, and he carried out his parish business and gave his children lessons here. Education had enabled Mr. Bronte to advance in the world, and he fostered his children's interest in literature, politics, art and music. He purchased the cabinet piano, which was mainly played by Emily and Anne, and decorated the study walls with engravings of biblical scenes by John Martin, similar to the ones seen here today. Martin's works were an early inspiration for the young Brontes. The magnifying glass Mr. Bronte used for reading and many of his personal belongings are displayed here. The dining room. Charlotte, Emily and Anne did much of their writing here. Their world-famous novels, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey, were written in this room. At night, the sisters would walk around the table discussing their writing. After Emily and Anne died, Charlotte was left to walk in solitude. By the fireplace stands the rocking chair where Anne would sit with her feet on the fender, and it is believed that Emily died on the sofa in this room. A plaster medallion portrait of their only brother, the ill-fated Branwell Bronte, hangs above the sofa, whilst a reproduction of the famous portrait of Charlotte by George Richmond hangs above the fireplace. By the windows there are engravings of two of Charlotte's heroes, the Duke of Wellington and William Makepeace Thackeray. The room was refurbished by Charlotte in 1850, and the decorative scheme she selected has been reintroduced. The curtains are specially woven in crimson union cloth, just as Charlotte ordered. The kitchen. The Bronte sisters were expected to take a share of the household tasks, and after Aunt Branwell's death, Emily acted as housekeeper, while Charlotte and Anne worked away from home as governesses. Baking bread or ironing allowed Emily the mental freedom to focus on her writing, and she was always happiest at home. In the Brontes' time, there was a back kitchen where the washing and heavier household work would have been carried out. This was demolished in 1878 to make way for a large kitchen extension which was added to the parsonage by Mr. Bronte's successor, John Wade. The window was blocked, the range removed, and the Brontes' old kitchen became a passageway to Wade's new dining room in the large gabled wing. A kitchen range of the correct period has now been added, and the room features a display of furniture, utensils and china which belong to the Bronte family. Mr. Nicholls' study. In the year 1854, around 5 years after the death of her siblings, Charlotte married the Reverend Arthur Bell Nicholls. Patrick had originally refused to approve the marriage on the grounds that no poor Irish pastor should be bold enough to suggest marrying his famous daughter. But eventually Patrick agreed, and the service took place here in Haworth. Patrick, however, did not attend. This room is the study that Charlotte arranged for Mr. Nicholls for when they returned from their honeymoon in Wales and Ireland to set up home at the parsonage with Patrick. The hallway and stairs. The stone-flagged entrance hall is typical of Yorkshire houses of the period. The hall floor and stairs were scrubbed with sandstone to keep them clean. A mahogany long case clock, made by the Barraclough of Haworth, stood halfway up the stairs. Mr. Bronte would wind it every evening at 9 o'clock on his way to bed. The home of the Barracloughs is now a fabulous restaurant called the Hawthorn, and you can see a snippet of our visit to it over on our TikTok and Instagram page. The children's study. It was here in childhood the Brontes would read and immerse themselves in their imaginary world. In 1826, Patrick returned home from Leeds with 12 toy soldiers for his son Branwell. These soldiers quickly sparked the imaginations of Charlotte, Branwell, Emily and Anne, and they began crafting fantastical stories about the soldiers that would carry into their writing as adults. On the side in this room you can see one of these toy soldiers, although I'm not sure if it is an original. Papa bought Branwell some soldiers at Leeds. Next morning, Branwell came to our door with a box of soldiers. Emily and I jumped out of bed, and I snatched up one and exclaimed, "This is the Duke of Wellington. It shall be mine." Charlotte Bronte, The History of the Year, 12th of March, 1829. Charlotte's room. This room was originally used by Mr. and Mrs. Bronte. After Mrs. Bronte's death in 1821, it was taken over by her sister, Elizabeth Branwell, who took charge of the running of the parsonage and taught her nieces sewing and other household accomplishments here. Aunt Branwell died in 1842, and thereafter the room is likely to have been used by different members of the family. When Charlotte married, she and Arthur Bell Nicholls shared the room, and it was here Charlotte died in 1855, with her husband praying at her bedside. Today the room is used to display Charlotte's clothing and personal treasures. Mr. Bronte's bedroom. After his wife's death, Mr. Bronte moved into this room. None of the original beds have survived, and the bed displayed here is a reproduction based on Branwell's drawing of himself being summoned from sleep by death. The other items of furniture were all in use at the parsonage, and the portraits were produced by Branwell during his brief career as a portrait artist. In later years, Branwell's addiction to alcohol made him a danger both to himself and his family, and his father brought him into this room so that he could watch over him. It was here Branwell died at the age of 31 in 1848, repenting the fact that in all his life he had done nothing either great or good. Branwell's studio. At one period this room served as a studio for Branwell, who had trained with the Leeds artist William Robinson and who hoped to become a professional portrait painter. A plan to send Branwell to train at the Royal Academy schools seems to have come to nothing, and his artistic career began and ended in Bradford, where he set up as a portrait painter in 1838. Over the years he pursued a professional literary career and in the 1840s achieved a measure of success when several of his poems appeared in local newspapers, making him the first of the Bronte siblings to see his work in print. Branwell also began work on writing a novel which was never completed. Branwell's final employment was with the Robinson family at Thorpe Green Hall near York as tutor to their only son. In July 1845, he was dismissed in disgrace for proceedings bad beyond expression. It is believed that he had embarked on a love affair with Mrs. Lydia Robinson. Branwell turned increasingly to alcohol and opium, which undermined his health and contributed to his death from tuberculosis at the age of 31 in September 1848. We will now leave the parsonage and go back outside to the gate. This was the site of the gate leading to the church used by the Bronte family and through which they were carried to their final resting place in the church. Deaths in the family. After being widowed in 1821, Patrick Bronte remained to care for his family, but sadly it was not without grief. In the summer of 1824, Maria and Elizabeth, the eldest of the Bronte children, were sent away to school in Kirkby Lonsdale. By February, Maria had returned home due to ill health, and she died of tuberculosis on the 6th of May. Shortly after, on the 31st of the same month, her sister Elizabeth also died. They were just 11 and 10 years old. After the deaths of his eldest daughters, Mr. Bronte kept his remaining children close by him at the parsonage and gave them lessons at home. Great things were expected of Branwell, the only boy in the family, but he had a string of failed careers, including 12 months as a portrait artist. Following the ending of an alleged love affair with Mrs. Robinson, Branwell turned to drink and drugs and was a familiar face at both the local apothecary store and at the Black Bull pub, which he is now said to haunt. Speaking of hauntings, there is another video coming soon covering the haunted pubs of Haworth. If you are interested in that sort of thing, please subscribe to the channel to be notified. Branwell died suddenly on the 24th of September 1848, aged 31. Soon after, Emily and Anne became ill. Emily died from tuberculosis on the 19th of December 1848 at the age of 30. Anne, also of ill health, decided to try a sea cure, and on the 24th of May 1849, accompanied by Charlotte and Ellen Nussey, she set out for Scarborough, where she died just 4 days later at the age of 29. To spare her father the anguish of another family funeral, Charlotte had her sisters buried in Scarborough. Then she returned to Haworth alone. In 1854, Charlotte accepted a proposal from her father's curate, Arthur Bell Nichols, and the couple were married in Haworth Church on the 29th of June, 1854. The marriage was happy, although short-lived. Charlotte Bronte died on the 31st of March, 1855, in the early stages of pregnancy. Despite its breezy moorland setting, Haworth was an overcrowded and unhealthy place to live. The main problem affecting the health of inhabitants was the water supply, which for much of the 19th century was contaminated. Unbeknown to the villagers, it had been running through the graveyard and through the rotting corpses, most of which were riddled with disease. There it seeped into their drinking water supply. This knowledge did not come to light until around 1850, when Patrick Bronte called for a health inspector to assess the area following the low life expectancy in the village. Patrick continued to campaign for better health improvements for the whole of Haworth, despite it being too late to benefit his own family. Mr. Bronte lived on in the parsonage for 6 years, cared for by his son-in-law, Mr. Bell Nichols. He died on the 7th of June 1861 at the age of 84, having outlived his wife and all 6 of his children. Patrick Bronte's funeral took place on the 12th of June 1861. All the shops in Haworth closed and every pew and inch of space in the church was filled. There was also several hundred people standing outside in the churchyard. I'd just like to take a minute to thank the Bronte Parsonage Society, as much of the information in this video has been taken from their guidebook and information plaques around the museum. There have been over 7 million visitors to the Bronte Parsonage Museum since it's opened its doors, and you can find lots more information over on their website. It's an independent charity and donations are welcome directly to them to support their work. I hope this video has given you some insight and that you get the chance to visit soon. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to support our channel by hitting the like and subscribe button. We do also have some more Haworth content over on our social media channels, including Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. Thanks guys, bye.